I didn't disappear all at once. That's the part no one noticed, including me. There was no breakdown. No dramatic exit. No moment where everything collapsed and forced attention. I kept showing up. Answering messages. Doing what was expected. From the outside, I was still there. Inside, I had already begun to fade. 10 seconds into this confession, here is the truth I avoided for most of my life. I didn't lose myself by making the wrong choices. I lost myself by becoming exactly who everyone needed. I was useful. That was my role. Not officially, not by title, but functionally. I was the one who handled things. Who stayed calm. Who absorbed stress without complaining. People leaned on me without hesitation, and I learned to carry weight without asking where it came from. At first, it felt meaningful. Being needed gives you a place in the world. It gives you purpose without forcing you to ask uncomfortable questions. As long as someone else requires something from you, you don't have to wonder what you want. I didn't realize how much I relied on that. I adjusted quickly. Learned what different people needed from me and became that version on demand. Supportive. Responsible. Available. I rarely said no, not because I was generous, but because saying yes felt safer than risking disappointment. People trusted me. They stopped worrying when I was involved. I took pride in that. But usefulness has a cost no one warns you about. The more you become what others need, the less space there is to ask who you are when no one needs anything. I didn't notice the shift at first. It happened quietly. I stopped initiating things for myself. Stopped expressing preferences unless asked directly. Stopped correcting misunderstandings if fixing them would create tension. I told myself this was maturity. That adulthood meant compromise. That caring meant flexibility. But flexibility, when it's one-sided, turns into erasure. My days became reactive. I responded instead of choosing. I handled instead of living. Every decision passed through the same question: what's expected of me here? Not, what do I want? That question started to feel irrelevant. I told myself I didn't need much. That my satisfaction came from being helpful. That wanting more was selfish when others relied on me. I didn't see how convenient that belief was, how it allowed me to avoid myself completely. I became very good at managing other people's lives. I had no idea how to live my own. The first sign something was wrong wasn't sadness. It was silence. An internal quiet that spread slowly. I stopped feeling strongly about things. Music sounded flatter. Achievements felt distant. Conversations felt scripted. I smiled at the right moments and felt nothing afterward. People said I was strong. I felt hollow. I remember sitting alone one evening, phone in my hand, answering messages one after another. Advice. Reassurance. Logistics. Emotional labor delivered efficiently, without resistance. When I finally put the phone down, the silence hit me hard. Not peaceful silence. Empty silence. I realized I had no idea what I would do if no one needed me that night. That thought scared me more than loneliness ever had. Because loneliness implies you're missing someone else. This felt like I was missing myself. I tried to ignore it. Told myself it was temporary fatigue. Burnout. Stress. I rested more. Organized better. Became even more efficient at helping. That made it worse. The more useful I became, the less visible I felt to myself. I started fantasizing about disappearing, not dying, not escaping dramatically, just becoming unreachable for a while. No messages. No expectations. No one needing anything. The fantasy wasn't about rest. It was about existing without a role. That realization unsettled me deeply. Because it meant I didn't know how to exist otherwise. I wasn't unhappy in a way that justified concern. I functioned too well for anyone to notice. That's the danger of quiet erosion, it looks like stability. But inside, I was vanishing piece by piece. I had become a solution instead of a person. And solutions are replaced, not known. One night, exhausted, I caught my reflection in a dark window. Not because I looked different, because I looked absent. Like someone occupying space without inhabiting it. That was the first time I admitted something I had never said out loud. If everyone suddenly stopped needing me, I wouldn't know who I am. That thought didn't pass. It stayed. And with it came a realization that shook me more than any crisis ever had. No one had asked me to disappear. I had done it willingly. Slowly. Politely. Because being needed felt safer than being known. And I didn't yet know how to survive without that safety. Once that thought took hold, if no one needs me, I wouldn't know who I am. Everything I did started to feel fragile. I still showed up. Still answered. Still carried what was handed to me. But now there was a split inside me, a constant awareness that something fundamental was wrong. Like living in a house after realizing the foundation is hollow. I began to notice how automatic my usefulness had become. Someone mentioned a problem, and I was already solving it before they finished the sentence. Someone hesitated, and I filled the silence with reassurance. Someone was overwhelmed, and I rearranged my time without thinking. It wasn't generosity anymore. It was reflex. And reflexes don't ask permission. I started wondering when I had last made a decision that didn't benefit someone else. Not a responsible decision. Not a practical one. A personal one. Something chosen simply because it mattered to me. I couldn't remember. That realization made everything heavier. Because it meant my life wasn't built on conscious sacrifice, it was built on habit. On the quiet assumption that my role was to absorb, to stabilize, to be needed. And roles are dangerous when you forget they are optional. The first time I tried to step back, it felt wrong in a way I didn't expect. I didn't announce it. I didn't explain. I just didn't immediately respond. I let a message sit unanswered. I allowed a problem to remain unsolved by me. The discomfort was immediate. Not from others, from me. I felt anxious, restless, guilty. Like I was failing an invisible test. My body reacted as if something terrible was about to happen. I kept checking my phone, my thoughts racing with imagined consequences. They'll think I don't care. They'll be disappointed. They'll stop trusting me. Those thoughts terrified me. Because trust had become my identity. But nothing happened. The problem was handled by someone else. The world adjusted. The absence I feared went mostly unnoticed. And that hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. I realized I had been defining myself by a function that wasn't as irreplaceable as I believed. That realization cut two ways. On one side, relief. On the other, panic. If I wasn't essential, then what was I? The emptiness grew louder as I pulled back more often. Not dramatically, just enough to notice the space left behind. Without constant demands, my days felt strangely open, and that openness frightened me. I didn't know how to fill it. I sat with myself in the evenings and felt exposed. Without requests to answer or problems to manage, I was left with my own thoughts, and I didn't like how unfamiliar they felt. I had spent years listening outward. Inward listening felt clumsy and overwhelming. Desires surfaced slowly, awkwardly, like muscles waking up after long paralysis. I noticed once I had ignored for so long they felt almost embarrassing. Simple things. Rest. Direction. Time that belonged to me without justification. Those wants came with fear. Because wanting something for myself felt like betrayal. Who was I to want more when others needed me? Who was I without usefulness? What would justify my place if I stopped performing? I realized how conditional my sense of worth had become. How deeply I believed that I earned my existence by being needed. Without that exchange, I felt undeserving, like someone taking up space without contributing. That belief ran deeper than I thought. It showed up as guilt whenever I rested. As anxiety whenever I said no. As shame whenever I imagined choosing myself. I didn't hate myself. I didn't even dislike myself. I just didn't recognize myself outside of service. That scared me more than exhaustion ever had. As I slowly withdrew from being constantly available, some relationships changed. Not abruptly, subtly. Messages became shorter. Invitations fewer. The warmth cooled in places where my usefulness had been the main bond. I tried not to take it personally. But it hurt. Because I realized something painful. Some people don't notice you, they notice what you do for them. And when the doing stops, the connection weakens. That understanding cracked something open in me. I wasn't just afraid of emptiness. I was afraid that without my role, there would be nothing left to hold anyone to me. I questioned myself constantly during that time. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was selfishness disguised as self-awareness. Maybe I was abandoning responsibilities that defined me for a reason. But another truth became impossible to ignore. The life I was living required me to stay absent from myself forever. And I couldn't do it anymore. The usefulness that once gave me meaning had started to cost me my identity. The role that once made me feel safe was now suffocating me. I felt like I was carrying everyone, and no one was carrying me. I wasn't angry. I was empty and tired of pretending that emptiness was strength. I could feel myself approaching a point of no return. A moment where I would have to choose between being needed and being real. Between maintaining the role that kept me visible to others and risking becoming invisible, but finally present to myself. That choice terrified me. Because for the first time in my life, being needed no longer felt like safety. It felt like disappearance with applause. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to walk away from that. The moment I stopped being needed wasn't dramatic. No confrontation. No announcement. No clean break. It happened quietly, through a series of small refusals that finally added up to something irreversible. I didn't save the day. I didn't step in. I didn't carry what wasn't mine anymore. And slowly, the world adjusted. That adjustment hurt more than I expected. Not because people were cruel, but because they were practical. Problems found new handlers. Emotional weight shifted elsewhere. Life continued without rearranging itself around me. I watched it happen with a strange mix of relief and grief. Relief, because I was finally allowed to stop. Grief, because I realized how easily I could be replaced. That realization stripped something bare inside me. For years, I had believed my usefulness made me indispensable. That being needed meant being valued. Letting go revealed the uncomfortable truth: I had been important, but not essential. And without that illusion, I didn't know who I was. The loneliness that followed was unlike anything I had known before. Not the loneliness of missing someone else, the loneliness of no longer having a function. My days felt quiet in a way that bordered on frightening. Without constant demands, time stretched out, unstructured and indifferent. I had nowhere to hide. I remember sitting alone one evening, the house silent, phone untouched, and feeling panic rise. There was no crisis to manage. No one waiting on me. No proof that I mattered in the way I had always measured it. For the first time, my existence wasn't justified by service. And that terrified me. I cried that night, not because I had lost people, but because I had lost the script that told me who I was. Without it, I felt small, undefined, unnecessary. But something else happened alongside that fear. I felt present. Painfully present. I could feel my body again. My thoughts slowed. My emotions, long buried under responsibility, began to surface. They weren't pretty. They weren't organized. They didn't make sense yet. But they were mine. I started rebuilding without a role to stand on. Slowly. Awkwardly. Learning how to want things without justifying them. Learning how to rest without guilt. Learning how to exist without proving my value every hour. Some relationships didn't survive this version of me. I had to accept that. Not everyone wants you, some people want what you provide. When the providing stops, the connection fades. That truth hurt, but it also clarified something essential. I hadn't lost everyone. I had lost access to people who only knew me as a resource. Others stayed. Those relationships changed. They became less smooth, more uneven, but more honest. I wasn't always the strong one anymore. I wasn't always available. I disappointed people sometimes, and the world didn't end. I learned that being needed is not the same as being known. And being known requires you to exist beyond your usefulness. Looking back now, I don't see my old self as weak. I see someone who survived by becoming necessary. That strategy worked, until it didn't. Because usefulness can keep you alive, but it can't tell you who you are once the demands stop. I didn't disappear because people needed too much from me. I disappeared because I never learned how to exist when they didn't. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself, the reliable one, the strong one, the one everyone depends on, I'm not telling you to stop helping. I'm telling you to ask a harder question. Who are you when no one needs anything from you? If the answer scares you, that's not a failure. That's an invitation. I became who everyone needed. And in doing so, I almost vanished completely. Now, even in the quiet, even in the uncertainty, even when I'm not useful to anyone, I'm learning how to stay. Not as a role. Not as a solution. As a person. And for the first time, that feels like something I don't have to earn.